Hey everyone, this is Matum from Tech Altar, and if Oppo made money for every time the Oppo R7 was leaked, then they would be a very rich company by now. But finally the leaks are over and I'm here with a full review of the device, so let's get started. The R7 is of course the successor to the R5, which came out just half a year ago and made headlines with being the thinnest smartphone in the world. While the predecessor was crazy thin indeed, it also had just too many compromises to make it a really good investment for many people. Limited battery and storage, a protruding camera, and the lack of a headphone jack were criticized by many, and the R7 is here to fix all of those issues while retaining most of what made the R5 good. How well does that formula work? Well, continuing with the tradition, the R7 might just be the best smartphone Oppo has ever put out in terms of build quality. Solid metal, namely magnesium alloy, is found all around the back and sides, which makes this phone look and feel undeniably premium. The feel in hand is actually one of the best I've had so far, as we have nicely curved edges that make the phone comfortable to hold, paired with a solid flat metal frame which gives the phone a nice grip. Both pretty rare features for a thin smartphone. On the front, you will find Gorilla Glass in the 2.5D fashion, so a slight curve makes the edges feel very nice to fondle, and also it allows the phone to spin nicely on any smooth surface. Jokes aside, it doesn't add much functionality, but feels awesome. I've been a fan of curved glass since the first Nokia Lumia smartphones, so I'm glad that today all the manufacturers are jumping on board with it. Actually, I'm sure you've noticed that the bezel-less side-to-side display technology that was leaked like crazy didn't make it to this Oppo smartphone, and instead we get bezels that look like those on any other smartphone. Especially the top and bottom part flanking the 5-inch screen are far away from being small, so maybe some device in the future will bring us what we saw in these leaks. Still, the screen size allows for a phone that is very comfortable to hold in one hand and takes away the need for finger acrobatics. Finally, Oppo has put out a more or less highly spec'd phone that isn't a phablet, and I think they nailed the ergonomics here. The size, the materials used, and the design add up to a phone that fits and feels as good or even better in my hand than any other phone I've used so far, and it's clear that Oppo did their homework here. Also, the camera protrusion is mostly gone and the headphone jack is where it belongs, all due to a slightly thicker body than found in the R5. Totally worth the trade-off, I think. I'm sure that many people would have liked a black model, but silver and this champagne-looking gold are our two options for now. At least as important as all of that is what happens when you turn the screen on. You can do that using the nicely placed and very clicky metal power button on the left or by double tapping the screen. A 1080p AMOLED screen at 5 inches is what you get here, and it's just as good as it sounds. Tons of resolution at this screen size, super punchy colors, great contrast and viewing angles, and even okay outdoor visibility. It's an absolutely killer display. Oppo's updated operating system, ColorOS 2.1, takes full advantage of the screen with its intensive colors, from the app icons to the much improved and this time around much more elegant wallpapers, and it feels like colors are attacking my retina straight from the home screen. I love it. The visual elements of this new ColorOS 2.1 are not just more colorful, but also more flat than before, and that's both a marked improvement. Following the footsteps of the R5, the menu system of the R7 also comes in a dark grey theme, which I wish was fully black to take advantage of the AMOLED screen. Anyway, ColorOS 2.1 is in my opinion a great facelift to Oppo's system, and unless you really wanted material design, it should satisfy you with its looks. It is, however, more pretty on the outside than on the inside, as on the R7 it's based on, wait for it, Android 4.4.4 KitKat. Now, the last time that was acceptable for a phone in this price range was 2014. So, to clear things up, the name ColorOS 2.1 refers to an Android skin that is more or less independent of Android versions, as it's built on top of KitKat here and on Lollipop on other devices such as the R7 Plus and the Find 7, and will eventually be updated to Lollipop on the R7 too, while still keeping the same name. So, while it's KitKat, it looks and feels nearly identical to Oppo's Lollipop software, except for some under-the-hood improvements such as app compatibility, art support, and so on. While it's practically impossible to justify the old Android version, I can at least say that the system is very stable and generally much better optimized than earlier ColorOS versions. I didn't experience any real hiccups or other issues, which is reassuring for a pre-production model, and performance seems in line with the hardware. A Snapdragon 615 plus 3 GB of RAM handle the system easily, and while this is clearly not a flagship, everyday tasks such as opening and switching between apps is snappy enough. Also, RAM usage is great as I get more than 2 gigs of free RAM with all apps closed, and that number rarely goes below 1 gig, even with lots of stuff running in the background. Overall, the R7 performs very well. So, clearly ColorOS 2.1 is better optimized than older versions were, and most of that comes from the fact that nearly no new features were added to this version, while a lot of unnecessary eye candy was removed. I personally totally support this direction of focusing on doing fewer things but doing them better, as all the things that were good about ColorOS are still here. Screen off gestures to quickly launch apps such as the camera, the feature-packed file manager, the network speed indicator in the status bar, tons of settings regarding what your apps are allowed to do and what they aren't, and so on. Overall, the only real issue I see with the software now is that it's running on KitKat. While an update to Lollipop is expected to come soon, it really should have been here at launch. Enough with the software talk though. What has been advertised as the main focus of this phone, other than its design, is a camera, or both cameras rather, but let's get the app out of the way first. It's a copy of iOS, which makes absolutely no sense because Oppo's previous layout was both more logical and practical than this one. I need 2 movements instead of 1 to capture video, which makes no sense at all. Also, settings are for some reason not in the empty space where they, belong, but instead they're buried under these bubbles cause I don't know who came up with this idea. Anyway, how do the cameras actually perform? Let's get the lesser one out of the way first. Since the rotating N1 and N3, we all know that Oppo clearly loves capturing your face using more megapixels, and this phone is no exception. You now have an 8 megapixel sensor on the front, which is ironically the same resolution as what you get on your main camera of an iPhone, and yeah, it captures great selfies with tons of detail, even in medium light. A wide-angle lens also helps you easily capture all your imaginary friends with you, and beautification is still a guilty and happy pleasure that works very well. Play around with it a bit and you'll be able to shoot cool pictures that are basically born for Instagram. As front-facing cameras go, this one's about as good as it gets right now. More interesting though is the main camera, which is pretty awesome too. Having a 13 megapixel sensor wouldn't by itself get my panties wet. But there's a ton of stuff to be excited about. Optics from Schneider, an ISO-cell camera sensor from Samsung which decreases crosstalk between neighboring pixels, and even face detection autofocus. Now those things get my juices flowing. An f2.2 aperture isn't the widest we've seen on smartphones, but overall this sounds like one hell of a good package. And it really is. Autofocusing has never been a strength of previous Oppo phones, and thank the lords of face detection autofocus, that is now a thing of the past. It's fast here and mostly accurate. When you shoot with good lights, pictures turn out fantastic. Good colors, no blur, plenty of detail, and even pretty okay dynamic range. Low light photography is passable too. Colors become a bit more washed out, but detail is preserved well enough. You can of course always switch to expert mode, which lets you set everything from focus, shutter speed, ISO, exposure compensation, and even white balance manually. If you're looking for shooting modes, then you can download a whole bunch of them from the camera store. Built-in filters, beautification, HDR, and all the other classic options are here, and of course Oppo's signature modes such as the famous Ultra HD mode for shooting 50 megapixel photos, which I admit I still never use, and also the Super Macro one, which lets you get ridiculously close to your subject and allows you to make fantastically detailed close-up pictures. And then there's support for a bunch of other things such as GIFs, shooting in RAW, the slightly awkward but kind of funny double exposure, and so on. What about video? Well, swipe left to start shooting, just like on iOS, and you can choose between normal, fast, and slow lenses, in other words, a sort of time-lapse and slow motion. Now, we've been asking for a time-lapse functionality for as long as I can remember, and I'm really happy that it's finally here, but I also hope that we'll be able to choose the speed in the next iteration. In normal mode, I actually find the videos to be just okay. The colors and dynamic range are fine, but 1080p is the highest option. There's still no continuous autofocus, no 60 frames per second, the bitrate is a bit too low, the audio quality is just not very good, and the lack of optical image stabilization also doesn't help. I mean, the results are passable, but after the awesome photo quality, I was expecting more. On the other hand, slow motion video is still fun to play with and works well enough, though the resolution is really low this time around. And finally, timeless videos are actually a lot more fun than I thought they would be, and the R7 shoots them well enough. Overall, I think the R7 takes some of the best photos in this category, and if you disregard the, in my opinion, silly layout, then functionality is great as well. It's clear that video was more an afterthought here, but if you're like most people and you care more about photo quality, then this camera should make you very happy. What is left then is battery life, and I still can't believe what's going on here, as I was expecting the 2320 mAh battery to die early on me. Instead, I got 4 to 5 hours of screen on time with each charge and got through the day easily. It seems that the relatively small and efficient screen, the more lightweight OS, and the not so power hungry CPU actually make a huge difference. And when I did have to charge, Oppo is still king of fast chargers with its VOOC technology, so your battery is usually full in no time. Overall, battery life is more a plus than a minus on this phone for me, which is very surprising. The R7 does address basically all the problems that the R5 had, and for me it ticks a lot of the right boxes. Outstanding build quality, just about perfect ergonomics at this size, an absolutely gorgeous screen, expandable storage up to 128 gigs, dual 4G SIM support, a camera that doesn't protrude but also performs a lot better, improved battery life with VOOC charging, and a much better optimized ColorOS. The catch? It runs KitKat, and there's just no excuse for that. If being on the cutting edge of software is your thing, then don't even think about this phone. If it's not, and you are looking for a good all-rounder, then this one should be worth taking a good long look at. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. And I have the Oppo R7 Plus with me, so I'm going to make a review of that in a couple of days. So if you want to see that, subscribe to my YouTube channel, follow me on Facebook and Google+, and I'll see you in the next one.